They called it scrap, but this alien ship is alive. A disgraced human pilot finds out Captain Rylan Cale sat alone in the dim light of his small cabin aboard the salvage freighter Iron Dawn. Once he had been a celebrated pilot in the Earth Defense Fleet, known for daring maneuvers and flawless missions. Now his name was whispered only in disappointment. One failed mission, one colony lost, and his career had crumbled like dust in a storm. The fleet had stripped him of rank, honor, and the respect of his peers. He stared at the holomap of derelict ships orbiting the outer rim of the human-controlled system. This was his world now, a place where the only currency was scrap metal and old technology. Most humans wouldn't touch it. Most humans had families, homes, futures. Rylan had none of that. He had only himself and the faint hope that he might find something extraordinary. The Iron Dawn drifted slowly toward the scrapyard, a graveyard of ships abandoned after wars, accidents, and mistakes. Some were small transport vessels, others massive freighters. Ryland's sensors pinged a signal that barely registered. Something big, something alive. He tightened his grip on the control stick. "Let's see what you are," he muttered. Through the haze of floating debris he saw it, a ship unlike any human vessel. Its shape was smooth, almost organic, with flowing lines and curves. Glowing veins ran across its surface, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Most scavengers had ignored it, labeling it scrap. Even from a distance it seemed aware. Ryland's heart raced. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts. This was no ordinary wreck. He maneuvered the Iron Dawn closer, weaving through broken hulls and twisted metal. The closer he got, the more the ship seemed to react. Panels shifted slightly, lights flickered, and a low hum resonated from deep within. Ryland froze. He had seen malfunctioning ships before, but nothing like this. It wasn't dangerous in a mechanical way. It was alive. Alive, or crazy, he whispered. "I guess we'll find out." He anchored his ship and suited up, grabbing a portable scanner and a few tools. Outside, the cold void pressed against him as he floated toward the massive vessel. The hull was surprisingly warm, and the surface seemed to shift subtly beneath his gloved hands. The ship responded to him, almost as if it were breathing. Ryland's scanner beeped erratically. The readings were confusing. Not human. Not anything in the fleet's archives. Whatever this was, it was far older and far more advanced than anything humans had built. He felt a thrill he hadn't felt in years. The thrill of discovery. "Easy there," he murmured. "Don't freak out on me." As he ran his hand along the hull, a section suddenly opened like a mouth, revealing a smooth, dimly lit corridor. Ryland stumbled backward, startled. The opening wasn't violent. It was an invitation. The ship was asking him in. He hesitated. Every instinct told him this could be a trap. The outer rim was notorious for pirate activity, and scavengers were known to sabotage each other. But another part of him, the part he had almost forgotten, burned with curiosity. This was a chance to do something remarkable, to touch the unknown. He floated inside, scanning the corridor. The walls were lined with a strange organic material that shifted under his touch, adapting to his movements. Lights pulsed along the veins of the walls, glowing brighter as he walked further in. The hum grew louder, resonating in his chest like a heartbeat. Ryland reached a central chamber, a space that felt almost alive. At the center, a soft, glowing orb hovered. He instinctively reached out, and a wave of images and emotions slammed into his mind. Pain, loss, wonder, fear. He staggered back, nearly dropping his scanner. The ship was communicating not with words, but with feelings. It was showing him visions of its past. Cities of metal and crystal, beings with shapes and minds unlike anything humans had imagined, all destroyed by war and neglect. Ryland gasped. He had heard of alien artifacts before, strange machines with unknown purposes. But this was something else. It was a survivor, a witness to a lost civilization, waiting for someone who could understand it. His heart pounded. Could he be that someone? He took a cautious step forward and focused on the orb, opening his mind as the ship had opened itself to him. Slowly, the fear began to fade, replaced by curiosity. Images of stars, planets, and ships flooded his mind. He saw designs, technologies, even histories encoded in ways his human brain could barely comprehend. The ship was alive, and it wanted him to know it. Rylan knelt, placing his hand on the glowing orb. The hum grew louder, a comforting rhythm now. The ship pulsed under his touch, shifting its corridor slightly, as if it was breathing with him. For the first time in years, Rylan felt hope. He wasn't just a disgraced pilot anymore. He was a witness to something extraordinary, something no human had ever experienced. A sudden noise snapped him out of his reverie. The corridor trembled, and a panel slid open somewhere behind him. He spun around to see shadows moving. Other scavengers had followed his trail. They had seen him enter the alien ship. "Get out! Move!" Rylan shouted, but the scavengers were closing in. He realized that outside the Iron Dawn was still vulnerable. If they destroyed it, he'd be trapped inside this living ship with no way out. Thinking quickly, he reached for a control panel embedded in the wall. It reacted instantly to his touch, glowing brighter, and a section of the hull sealed automatically. The ship seemed to sense danger and was protecting him. The scavengers shouted outside, banging on the hull, but the ship remained closed, alive and aware. Rylan felt a strange surge of gratitude. He had expected metal and circuits, but this was something more, something that could think, feel, and even protect. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Rylan pressed his back against the wall, listening to the hum of the ship, the heartbeat of a being older than any human memory. He realized that this ship had chosen him, or at least it had allowed him to choose it. "I don't know if I can handle this," he admitted quietly. "But I guess we'll find out together." The ship pulsed almost as if it understood, its glow rhythmically brightening and dimming. Rylan smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't worn in years. For the first time since his disgrace, he felt alive. He wandered deeper into the corridors, discovering rooms that seemed to shift according to his presence. One area looked like a cockpit, but unlike any human design. Controls were not buttons or joysticks, but patterns of light and energy. He reached out tentatively, and the ship responded, showing him how to interact. Hours passed, though he barely noticed. Time was different inside this living vessel. He felt connected in a way that defied explanation. The ship was teaching him, and he was learning. Together, they formed a fragile, silent bond. Then, suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the hull. The ship jolted slightly, and the lights flickered. Rylan's heart jumped. Something, or someone, was approaching. He floated to a nearby observation window. Outside, he saw other scavengers, armed and desperate. They had followed him into the scrapyard and were now circling the massive alien ship. Rylan realized he was sitting on more than discovery. He was sitting on power, knowledge, and danger. And the moment he touched the hull, he had become part of it. The ship pulsed brighter, almost impatiently. It seemed to sense his fear but also his resolve. It was ready to move, ready to fight, ready to survive. And it had chosen him as its partner. Rylan took a deep breath. "All right," he said softly. "Let's see what we can do." The hatch opened behind him wider, as if inviting him further in. The alien vessel had a journey for him, and he had no idea where it would lead. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Outside, the scavengers prepared to breach the hull. Inside, the ship hummed like a living heart. And Rylan, the disgraced human pilot, stepped fully into the unknown, ready to find out just what this living scrap of alien technology could do. And maybe, just maybe, redeem him in the process. Rylan Cale's heart raced as he floated in the central chamber of the living alien ship. Outside, the scavengers' shouts echoed faintly, but the ship's hull absorbed most of the noise. The pulse of the ship's glowing veins felt like a heartbeat against his chest, steadying him, giving him courage. He had spent hours wandering the corridors, discovering that the ship was more than metal and circuits. It was alive. Walls shifted under his touch, corridors rearranged themselves, and lights pulsed in patterns that seemed almost like language. He had tried to make sense of the strange glowing panels and orbs, but for now, he focused on understanding the ship's emotions. It had been showing him visions, glimpses of an alien civilization long gone, cities of light and crystal, ships traveling between stars, and beings unlike anything human minds had imagined. The images were beautiful and tragic. War had consumed them. And now, the last survivor of that species had drifted alone through space, waiting. Ryland shivered. The ship had been alive for centuries, and now it was awake again. And it had chosen him. But the danger outside wasn't going away. The scavengers had brought weapons. He could see the glint of metal through the ship's hull, and he knew they wouldn't hesitate to break in. He moved carefully through the corridors, seeking a place where he could observe without being seen. The ship's interior seemed to sense his fear and adjusted around him. A corridor curved behind him from the observation ports, and the lights dimmed to match his mood. "It's protecting me," he whispered. "I think it trusts me." He paused before a large chamber that looked like a cockpit, though unlike any cockpit he had ever seen. There were no buttons, no levers. Patterns of light floated in the air, shifting in response to his thoughts. Ryland reached out, and the lights pulsed brighter. A faint sensation filled his mind, a sense of encouragement, almost like a teacher guiding a student. Tentatively, he focused. He imagined moving the ship, imagining where he wanted it to go. The lights responded, aligning into patterns that mirrored his thoughts. His pulse quickened. "You can understand me," he said aloud, amazed. "I can actually control you?" The ship responded with a pulse in his chest, a feeling of agreement. But it wasn't simple. It wasn't like piloting a human vessel. The ship didn't obey orders. It communicated. It tested him. He had to think, to feel, to anticipate. And for the first time since his disgrace, he felt sharp and alive. Suddenly a loud crash echoed from the hull, and Ryland spun around. The scavengers had started to break in. One of them, a large man with a makeshift plasma rifle, smashed against the outer hull, sparks flying. The ship shivered, almost in pain, and Ryland felt the vibrations in his chest. "They can't hurt you," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "I won't let them." He focused on the glowing cockpit lights. Patterns shifted under his hands, and a warm, thrumming sensation filled his mind. The ship reacted almost like a living muscle, and the corridor walls subtly shifted to block the intruder's access. Panels slid and covered the hull where the scavengers were hitting, redirecting their impact. Ryland realized something incredible. The ship wasn't just alive. It was defensive. It could protect itself, and it was learning him, just as he was learning it. But the scavengers weren't giving up. They climbed onto the hull, tools and weapons ready, trying to force the hatch open. Ryland felt the tension of the ship's emotions surge: panic, fear, anger. He instinctively sent calm thoughts, images of safety, trust, and collaboration. Slowly, the vibration settled. The ship responded, reinforcing the hull where the attackers pressed, creating a temporary barrier between them and him. Ryland took a deep breath. He had to move, had to find a way to get free. He floated back toward the corridor that led to the rear of the ship, discovering that it twisted and elongated, almost like a living muscle stretching to protect him. The scavengers followed, but the ship subtly manipulated the layout, forcing them to retrace steps and stumble. "Good, good," Ryland muttered. "We're thinking together." As he moved deeper, he reached a chamber filled with strange alien devices, floating holographic shapes, glowing orbs, and screens filled with symbols he didn't understand. The ship pulsed at him, almost excitedly. Ryland realized it was showing him something important: its history, its knowledge, its purpose. He reached out to one orb, and suddenly he was flooded with images. Ships traveling faster than light, stars being mapped, planets being terraformed. He saw alien minds interacting with the ship as if it were a living companion to their civilization. Then came the war. Visions of destruction, Metal cities crumbling, alien beings fleeing, and the ship launching into the void to escape. Ryland staggered back, breathless. "You survived," he whispered. "You waited all this time. For someone like me?" The ship pulsed in response, and for a moment Ryland felt a strange warmth, a sense of connection that transcended words. He wasn't alone. He had never felt so connected to anything before. But the peace didn't last. A sharp vibration ran through the ship. The scavengers had breached the outer hull. Sparks flew, alarms pulsed, and the ship shuddered violently. Ryland barely held on, reaching out to the glowing cockpit interface. "Stay with me," he said. "We can do this together." The cockpit lights shifted rapidly, creating a pattern that seemed to envelop his mind. The ship was responding to his emotions, his instincts. It moved before he even realized what he was thinking, shifting corridors, closing bulkheads, and guiding him toward an emergency launch area. Ryland marveled at the feeling. Flying this vessel was nothing like piloting a human ship. It was alive, aware, and thinking with him, not for him. And in that cooperation he felt a surge of hope and power he hadn't felt in years. But danger was closing in. The scavengers were persistent, cutting through the hull with laser torches. Ryland had to act fast. He focused on the cockpit interface, imagining a defensive maneuver. The ship pulsed in response. The walls twisted, and the room itself seemed to lift and shift, forming a protective barrier. Sparks flew as metal twisted under the pressure, blocking the intruders. "They're not ready for this," Ryland muttered with a grin. "Neither are you." He realized then that the ship's intelligence was not just mechanical, it was emotional. It reacted to fear, hope, and determination. The stronger his resolve, the more it could act. Together, they were a force the scavengers could not predict. Ryland guided the ship to an outer docking bay, twisting through the debris of the scrapyard. The scavengers pursued, but the ship's corridors and external structure bent and adapted. It moved like a living predator, agile and intelligent. Ryland felt the thrill run through him. For the first time in years, he was not a failure. He was a partner. And with this living ship, he had a chance to prove himself again. Suddenly, an idea struck him. If he could bond further with the ship, learn to think with it instead of just reacting, they might escape not just the scavengers, but the entire rim system. He focused, projecting calm, confidence, and trust. The cockpit lights pulsed rhythmically, responding in kind. Images of uncharted space appeared in his mind, the ship showing him possible escape routes, hazards, and paths of speed. Ryland's mind raced, adjusting to the alien interface. Together, they calculated trajectories, dodging debris and sensors that would have trapped any human vessel. The scavengers fired relentlessly, but every attack was anticipated and avoided. The living ship bent and shifted around them, shielding Ryland and repelling attempts to board. Each pulse, each movement of the vessel was guided by a shared intuition between man and machine. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, Ryland and the ship slipped past the last scavenger patrol. They were free, hurtling into the void beyond the rim, leaving the scrapyard in danger behind. The stars stretched into lines as the ship adjusted its systems, showing Ryland glimpses of faster-than-light travel. Ryland exhaled, leaning back in the cockpit. "We did it," he whispered. "We're alive. And we're free." The ship pulsed softly, almost like a contented sigh. Ryland smiled, realizing something profound. Humans had often believed the universe was just empty space and lifeless matter, but the truth was different. Life could take forms humans had never imagined, and sometimes it could choose humans to be its companions. As the ship hummed and pulsed beneath him, Ryland felt a spark of hope he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since his disgrace, he was not alone. He was not powerless. He was part of something extraordinary. And he knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning. Ryland Cale leaned forward in the cockpit, gripping the glowing controls of the living alien ship. The Iron Dawn's sensors had faded behind them, leaving only the endless stretch of stars ahead. At first he had felt relief, freedom, at last, from the scavengers and the grim scrapyard. But that relief was short-lived. Space was not empty. Even beyond the fringes of human control, danger waited. And Rylan had no illusions now. He and the ship were extraordinary, but extraordinary things always drew attention. The ship pulsed gently under his touch, sensing his caution and anticipation. It was alive, yes, but it was also curious. It seemed to be testing him, inviting him to explore the boundaries of its abilities, and he intended to follow. For hours, he and the ship moved silently, learning each other's rhythms. Rylan discovered that he didn't just operate the ship, he communicated with it. A thought here, a feeling there, and the ship responded instantly. Doors opened before he reached them, corridors rearranged to ease his path, and lights pulsed in patterns that calmed him. But then, on the edge of a distant star cluster, the calm shattered. Rylan's sensors picked up a massive signature ahead, a sleek, black warship, bristling with weapons. At first he thought it might be another scavenger vessel, but the readings told him otherwise. It was military-grade, highly advanced, and very hostile. Rylan froze. He had survived the scrapyard because he was clever and careful. But this was something else. The warship changed course as if it had sensed them. Its weapons hummed, ready to fire. "They know we're here," Rylan muttered. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "And I don't think they're friendly." The ship pulsed, and a flood of images hit his mind. It was scared, yes, but also curious, intrigued by the presence of this aggressive human-made vessel. Rylan realized that the ship could sense threats, anticipate movements, and even calculate strategies, but it could not fight without him. They had to act together. Rylan exhaled and focused on the glowing patterns in the cockpit. He imagined evasive maneuvers, weaving paths through the star cluster. The ship responded instantly, twisting and reshaping itself. Corridors became external hull sections that flexed like muscles, deflecting energy readings. The ship moved with elegance, almost like it was dancing between stars. The warship fired. Bright streaks of energy cut across the void, and Rylan felt the vibrations pulse through the ship's hull. The living vessel recoiled slightly, sending an image of pain and alarm into his mind. He gritted his teeth. "Not today," he said. He reached for the alien controls, letting instinct take over. He guided the ship into an impossible angle, curving through an asteroid field that appeared suddenly in their path. The warship's sensors lagged behind. Human-made technology was precise but predictable. The ship reacted to Rylan's thoughts, shifting its shape like water, flowing around hazards. Rylan felt a surge of exhilaration. Together, they were unstoppable. But only if they stayed in perfect sync. Suddenly, the warship launched a swarm of drones. Small, fast, and deadly, they darted toward them like metallic predators. Rylan's pulse raced. The ship pulsed in response, a mixture of fear and determination. "Trust me," Rylan whispered. He reached out to the floating control panels, letting his mind merge with the ship's awareness. Light patterns flickered, pulsing with intensity. The corridors bent and shifted, twisting into shapes that trapped and deflected the drones. Energy beams bounced off the ship's adaptive hull. Rylan guided the ship with precise human ingenuity, combining instinct and experience. He remembered how to anticipate enemy maneuvers from his days as a fleet pilot. The living ship reacted instantly, faster than any human or AI could manage alone. The first drone slammed into the hull, only to ricochet harmlessly into space. Another tried to flank them, but the ship twisted, enveloping the threat in a protective shell of energy. Sparks flew, lights danced across the corridors, and Rylan felt a thrill he hadn't felt since his glory days in the fleet. For the first time, he realized something profound. The ship's intelligence was immense, but it needed human creativity and courage to reach its full potential. Alone, it was strong, but together, they were formidable. Humanity was not weaker than the universe. It was adaptable, inventive, and capable of partnership. Rylan grinned despite the danger. "We're not just surviving," he said. "We're learning." together. But the warship wasn't giving up. It changed tactics, sending a massive energy net toward them. Rylan felt the ship tense under him. The pulse of the hull reflected anxiety, the alien equivalent of fear. He reached out, projecting calm and trust, showing the ship that they could handle it. Slowly, the pulse steadied. He focused. The ship's adaptive surface began to absorb and redirect the energy net, bending light and force around them. Rylan's mind raced with calculations, improvising with instinct rather than theory. Every move had to be precise. One mistake, and the ship, or he, could be destroyed. The warship fired again, a barrage this time, but the living vessel twisted and flexed, deflecting attacks in a mesmerizing display of movement and light. Rylan felt a strange bond growing stronger, a connection deeper than any human relationship. The ship was alive, yes, but it trusted him, and he trusted it. Finally, he saw an opening, a narrow passage through the star cluster that no warship could navigate easily. He guided the ship into the gap, twisting and contorting it like a ribbon through space. The warship struggled to follow, its weapons unable to adjust quickly enough. Rylan exhaled sharply. They had evaded the immediate danger. But he knew this was only the beginning. Whoever, or whatever, had sent the warship would not give up so easily. They were entering a part of space uncharted by humans, where unknown forces awaited. The ship pulsed softly, a reassuring rhythm now. Rylan felt a surge of hope and determination. They had survived together, and they had grown stronger in the process. Human courage and creativity combined with alien intelligence had proven unstoppable, even against the most advanced human technology. As they moved deeper into uncharted space, Rylan reflected on everything he had learned in the past few days. He had been a failure once, disgraced and alone, but now he was part of something extraordinary. The ship had chosen him not because he was perfect, but because he was human. And humans, he realized, had a unique strength, the ability to adapt, to think creatively, and to persevere when all seemed lost. He floated to the observation window and stared out at the stars stretching into infinity. Ahead lay the unknown. New systems, new dangers, and perhaps new allies. He didn't know what awaited them, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel fear. He felt possibility. The ship pulsed again, in perfect harmony with his heartbeat. They were partners now, two forms of life from different worlds, moving together through the cosmos. And Rylan understood something essential. Humanity was not just a species of survival. Humanity was capable of wonder, of courage, and of partnership that even the stars themselves could not ignore. Suddenly, a warning flashed across the cockpit panels. Another signature. Closer, faster, more aggressive than before. Rylan tensed. The warship had not been alone. They were being hunted again, this time by an unknown entity, faster than anything he had seen. He felt the ship react, a wave of alarm and urgency pulsing in his mind. The bond between them deepened instinctively. They would face this together. Rylan took a deep breath, focusing his thoughts, his feelings, his instincts on one single goal: survival. He extended his hands, allowing the ship to guide his thoughts, to amplify his instincts. Every movement, every pulse of energy, every twist of the corridors became a dance of life and intelligence. The unknown threat approached, and the stars themselves seemed to blur as the ship twisted into impossible angles. Rylan smiled grimly. "You and I, we're unstoppable," he whispered. "Let them come." The pulse of the living vessel quickened in agreement, and together, human and alien intelligence prepared to face the next challenge. Whatever it was, they would meet it head-on. Rylan was no longer disgraced. He was alive. He was powerful. And he was ready. As the distant glint of the approaching vessel grew larger, Rylan felt a thrill unlike anything he had experienced. This was more than survival. This was adventure. This was humanity proving that it could stand alongside the universe itself, in courage, intelligence, and indomitable spirit. And somewhere deep in the living vessel, the alien consciousness seemed to smile. They were ready. Rylan Cale gripped the glowing control panels, his knuckles white. The approaching vessel had grown enormous, black as a void, bristling with weaponry. Its sensors had locked on. Every instinct screamed danger, but Ryland's mind was sharp, alive, tuned to the living ship beneath him. He felt the pulse of the ship, faster now, anxious but ready. It was alive, yes, but it trusted him, and he trusted it. Together, they were more than pilot and ship. They were partners. "They don't know what they're facing," he whispered, his voice steady. "But we do." The unknown vessel fired first. Beams of blue energy streaked across the stars, slamming into the living hull. Ryland felt the vibrations, the ship shuddering under the impact. Sparks of light flashed inside the corridors as defensive panels shifted to absorb the hits. He focused on the cockpit interface. The glowing panels responded to his thoughts, his feelings, his instincts. He didn't just fly the ship, he felt it, and it felt him. Together, they reacted faster than the enemy could anticipate. The warship sent another barrage, and this time a wave of drones poured out. They were sleek, deadly, and fast, engineered to swarm and overwhelm. Ryland's pulse raced. One false move, one miscalculation, and they could be shredded in seconds. "Not today," he muttered, taking a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a brief moment and let instinct guide him. His mind projected calm, courage, and trust into the ship. The corridors bent and twisted like liquid metal, forming protective tunnels that deflected the drone's attacks. The glowing veins pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. A drone smashed into the hull, ricocheting harmlessly into space. Another tried to flank him, but the ship twisted again, creating a living shield. Sparks flew as the drones collided with panels that seemed almost alive, absorbing energy and redirecting it safely. Ryland's mind raced. The ship was strong, fast, and intelligent, but it needed him to think creatively. He remembered his fleet training, his past missions, his instincts honed by years of danger. He combined them with the ship's adaptive abilities, improvising maneuvers that no machine alone could have managed. The two of them moved like one being. Ryland thought of evasive paths, and the ship bent itself around asteroids and stellar debris. He imagined counterattacks, and the ship pulsed with energy, firing beams of its own at the enemy drones, melting them into harmless sparks of metal. But the warship wasn't finished. It changed tactics, sending a massive energy net toward them. The living vessel pulsed wildly. This was more dangerous than anything before. Ryland reached out, sending calm and strategy through the bond they shared. The ship responded, twisting, folding, and stretching in ways that seemed impossible, absorbing and redirecting the energy net. Ryland smiled grimly. "We can do this together." The enemy warship fired again, a continuous barrage this time. The pulses slammed into the ship, bending panels, rattling corridors, shaking the glowing veins. Ryland's pulse raced, but he didn't panic. He had learned to trust the ship, and now it trusted him. He focused on one thought: outsmart them. Using the ship's adaptive abilities, he created a trap. He guided the living corridors outward, forming false paths, while the ship's energy systems created decoy pulses that mimicked their location. The enemy warship was fooled. Its weapons fired at illusions while Ryland twisted the real vessel behind a dense asteroid field. Sparks and energy blasts ricocheted off the rocks harmlessly, and Ryland grinned. Human creativity plus alien intelligence. An unbeatable combination. But the final challenge came fast. The enemy flagship launched a massive drone swarm, larger and deadlier than before. Ryland's mind raced. There wasn't enough room to evade. If they tried to fight conventionally, they would be overwhelmed. He paused, closing his eyes for a moment. He remembered all he had learned about the ship, the way it responded to emotion, to thought, to instinct. He projected not just calm, but determination. He imagined himself inside the swarm, anticipating every movement. The ship pulsed faster, almost like it was matching his intensity. Then he acted. He guided the ship directly into the center of the swarm. At first, it seemed like madness. The drones swarmed in every direction, energy beams cutting through space, but the ship reacted instantly, reshaping itself, twisting and folding around the drones like a living predator. Its panels split and shifted, cutting and disabling drones, absorbing energy, redirecting blasts harmlessly into space. Ryland's mind was in perfect sync with the ship. He felt every pulse, every movement, every flicker of energy. He could see the swarm's weaknesses before they even attacked. One by one, the drones were neutralized, their energy dissipated by the living vessel's adaptive hull. Finally, the enemy flagship itself slowed, confused, and battered by the unpredictable maneuvers of a ship it could not understand. Ryland grinned. They didn't see us coming. The living vessel pulsed with satisfaction, almost like a laugh. Ryland felt the bond between them strengthen. They were not just pilot and ship. They were partners, equals in strategy, courage, and survival. He guided the vessel closer to the enemy flagship, studying it carefully. It was heavily armed, yes, but its predictability was its weakness. Using a combination of diversion, speed, and the ship's adaptive abilities, he fired concentrated energy pulses from the alien ship's hull, disabling the flagship's weapon systems one by one. The flagship could do nothing as the living vessel danced around it, striking with precision. Finally, its systems failed completely, and it drifted powerless, a hulking shadow in the void. Ryland exhaled, feeling a rush of triumph. They had won. The ship pulsed softly beneath him, a steady, satisfied rhythm. Ryland leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time in years, he felt whole. He was no longer the disgraced pilot who had lost a colony. He was a human who had faced impossible odds, survived, and thrived. And he had done it not alone, but in partnership with life from beyond the stars. As they moved away from the wreckage of the warship and the disabled flagship, Ryland reflected on everything he had learned. Humans were clever, adaptable, and courageous. Alone, they were vulnerable, but with creativity, empathy, and trust, they could overcome even the greatest challenges. Humanity was not just survival. Humanity was brilliance in action. The ship pulsed again, showing him images of uncharted systems, distant planets, and strange civilizations. It was offering him a choice: continue exploring, continue learning, continue adventuring across the stars. Ryland smiled. "We'll go," he said. Together, the living vessel seemed to respond, reshaping itself into a sleek, streamlined form, ready to travel faster than anything humans had imagined. The corridors stretched and reformed, the glowing veins pulsed brighter, and the cockpit shimmered with the energy of life itself. Ryland leaned back and allowed himself a moment of joy. He was alive. The ship was alive. And together, they were unstoppable. In the void beyond the rim of human space, they disappeared among the stars, a living testament to the ingenuity, courage, and indomitable spirit of humanity. They were explorers, fighters, survivors. They were proof that humans could rise, even in the face of the impossible. And somewhere deep within the living vessel, a thought echoed, almost like a whisper. Humans were worthy. Humans were extraordinary. And with them, the universe was theirs to discover. Ryland Cale pressed a hand to the glowing controls, feeling the pulse beneath him, and whispered, "Let's see what's out there." The stars stretched ahead, endless and bright. The living ship pulsed in harmony with his heartbeat. Together, they sailed into the unknown, alive, unstoppable, and ready for the adventures the universe had waiting. For Ryland, the disgrace was gone. The scavengers were forgotten, the enemies defeated. He was no longer a pilot of humans. He was a pioneer, a partner, a hero. And humanity had just taken one more step toward proving itself among the stars.